Quasar's a big puncher.
Crazy, man. This football is it. Well, don't do the boxing thing. You can get hurt there.
On this podcast is one of the biggest and
I always tell people there's nothing like a championship fight.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Brooklyn Boxing Podcast. I am joined by Brian Custer. Appreciate you coming on here today and excited to talk about your journey and talk a little boxing as well.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. So I was reading a little bit about your story, and it all started in Columbus, Ohio. So first I was trying to think, I wonder what NFL team you're a fan of. I know you covered the Jets for a while, but out of Columbus, I was wondering, what was your team growing up?
Yeah, I'm definitely Buckeye born and bred. So I'll be honest with you, especially when you're from Columbus, Ohio, your first love and first professional team is the Ohio State Buckeyes. I mean, you just eat, sleep, and breathe Ohio State football. So I would say out of the womb, that was my first professional team. Then after that, I think as a young kid, I just, for some reason, loved Roger Staubach, loved Tony Dorsett and Drew Pearson. So became a Cowboys fan, and it was just always my dream to live in Dallas, cover the Cowboys. And the first time I got the opportunity to do it, I took it and moved to Dallas and got to accomplish my lifelong dream.
Wow, that's I didn't even know that. That's awesome. But as you mentioned, it just makes me think about the college football landscape right now, and how important these college teams are to certain areas in the country, like Ohio State's effect on Columbus, and what that could mean to Columbus if there isn't a football season. It's pretty crazy what's going on.
Yeah, it's it's not good when Ohio State. And they're just one of the teams in the Big Ten closed down the workouts and said no more football workouts and no more for the time being. And they've suspended fall sports, excluding football for right now. But that's not a good sign when you've got a university like Ohio State who does that. You saw the Pac-12 did the same thing. They've suspended their voluntary workouts. It just doesn't, it's one thing, I think, for the NFL to try to play and to play without fans and to know that some of the guys may come down with COVID, but they're professionals. So they know the risk, what they're doing. It's another thing when you have college students and you're saying, okay, you need to play. All of a sudden, then that's where legally and liability come into play. And I think these universities are cognizant of that. I think that's probably why you see a lot of them trying to get kids to sign waivers. So it's going to be a really touchy deal. But I think if it continues to roar, and I'm talking about COVID like it is, I think you'll see more coaches. You saw Oklahoma come out and say, why not play in the spring? It's doable. I think you'll see a push for them to have the college season in the spring.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. And like you said, it's like these are amateur players, so it's hard to say you guys got to play.
Right.
And I mean, guys are already lobbying for pay, at the college level. So it's like it's a complicated landscape, and I don't know what the right answer is. But yeah, we'll see how that plays out. But hopefully there'll be some form of sports back in a safe manner. I mean, obviously there's been some boxing back, which is great. Even some basketball. I was surprised to see the other day the tournament. I had no idea that was back, but I was watching a little bit of that. So it was good to see some basketball before the NBA comes back. So that's all good stuff. It's encouraging to see some sports and people love sports. So we got to get
absolutely.
So. But yeah, growing up in Columbus, Ohio, I'm curious about your background, athletically, like what that looked like for you. like what sports you played, what was your interest? Was it football? Was it boxing at all at that age? Or I know you have a Taekwondo background. I'd love to talk more about that as well.
Yeah.
So what'd that look like for you when you were growing up?
Yeah, I think like most kids, I was definitely more as I was younger, football, basketball, baseball. I think as I got to high school, it was more focused on football and basketball, especially basketball for me. Was more my first love, and I've always had the opportunity, to work with Jim Jackson, who I think is just a great person, is a good friend, and just remember when we were in high school, it was like, that was the thing. I wanted to play against Jim Jackson because he was up in Toledo, and Toledo Macomber was like a huge school. That's who you wanted to play. And fortunately for us, we got knocked out in the regional finals, but they went on, they won the state. And so it was great that, now we get to work together. We get to always talk about the old times and who was the better player and things of that nature. So I think, for like a lot of kids, for me, it was football, basketball, but definitely basketball was probably my first love.
So, I mean, I know Ohio with football, of course, it's huge, but
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about the basketball scene in Ohio. I'm unfamiliar with it. Was that as like rabid a fan base kind of? And
Yeah, I think for us, it was basketball was always big. I mean, Ohio State basketball was good. Those are the guys who you kind of looked up to, even I think Jim would tell you, it's just your goal. You always want to grow up and play for Ohio State. And at that time, the arena that the Schottenstein's arena that they have now wasn't there. It was St. John Arena, was the arena for the Ohio State Buckeyes. And that was where you wanted to play. And for us in high school, that's where the state championship was. And the district, the regional tournament was on the fairground. And when you go to the fairgrounds and you play at the fairgrounds, you go in this bubble, and it seats of like 15,000 people. I mean, it's like everyone in Columbus and from all around the state come, and that's like the thing. It's what you want to do, and if you can win the district, you win the regionals, then you go to the state, and that's where you play at St. John Arena. But again, unfortunately, we got knocked out in the regional finals, so we didn't get the chance to play at St. John Arena. But that's where Jim and those guys played, and I think for us, that's what it's all about, especially in Ohio. I mean, obviously football's number one, but right behind it is basketball.
And as your high school career progressed, were you looking to play sports collegiately?
Yeah, I was. I think for me it was, I had gotten like offers to play, and I was kind of an arrogant kid. I had gotten offers to play at these Division II schools, and I was like, Division II? What are you talking about? I'm Division I guy, and my coach was all about, this is a free offer. These are Ashland and Ashland College, and I'm trying to remember all the other ones. And he was like, you need to jump on these, and I really felt slighted. But once I thought about it and I sat back, for me, I've always wanted to attend an HBCU. I wanted to go to a historically Black college, so I chose Hampton out of all of them. And I knew that, Hampton is obviously in Virginia. And at that time, it's different now. But, when you think about it, in the 90s, their recruiting blueprint probably didn't even go out of Virginia. So, for me, my coach was calling them saying, look, he's trying to come here. Then you had to actually leave a voicemail on a coach's phone and try to send him a VHS tape. And so those type of things get lost in the mail and this and that. So I knew I had to go. I probably had to go walk on. And he said the same thing. He said, by the time you do all that, you might as well just go to school. And so that's what I did, and went to Hampton. It was the best thing I did to not play sports, because it was the best 4 years of my life. I knew I always wanted to do television. So I went there on a mission, on a purpose. And my parents, my mother said something to me very prophetic before I left, because she thought I was going to go to school for free. And for me to go from that to having them to pay for going to Hampton, she said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to work, double time. I'm going to work triple time, but you better graduate with honors. If I'm going to pay for your school, you're going there, you're going to graduate in 4 years, but when I come to your graduation, you better be walking across the stage with a gold rope around your neck. And I made that promise, and I kept the promise.
Wow. And yeah, you just mentioning, Hampton and HBCU, it just immediately made me think about Mikey Williams today, high school basketball star. And there's so much talk about him potentially picking a HBCU.
It's like McCord Maker, who was the top recruit in basically the country, who chose Howard. So, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these guys now, and I think a lot of it too has to do with the movement that's going on too. I think they realize, like, okay, well, you know what? Why not take my talents to a historically black college? Because, I think unlike the past, whether it's the NBA, whether it's the NFL, if you can play, they're going to find you. I don't care where you're at.
Right.
And so I think now a lot of these kids realize now it doesn't really matter where I am, because if I'm that good, they're going to find me. And I think that young man realizes that. He realizes the history, the tradition of so many great graduates that come out of Hampton, that come out of Howard, Morehouse, all of these schools. It's like, okay, why not?
Right. Yeah. And then basketball is a sport where, it only takes a few guys to be really good. So it's like a team like, if he does choose wherever he chooses to go, if he brings a couple guys with him, they can be a contender right away. So it could
absolutely. And listen, you got guys like Rick Mahorn, you got guys like Charles Oakley, you got all of these guys who went to historically black colleges and came to the NBA and were great players.
Right. And it's funny, like how you mentioned with recruiting kind of on all levels, like it's so different now.
Exactly.
Like you said, you're basically making sales calls.
Yes, exactly.
Trying to get a team to pay attention. And that's like, you can't really be missed if you're legit, if you're a stud.
Absolutely.
And that goes for college recruiting and NBA, it's social media, everything. It's like, there could be some kid anywhere in the country, and if he's a stud, like it's hard to miss guys, I feel like, now from a recruiting.
Absolutely. It's funny. I think in the middle of my freshman year is when I even had a copy of my tape when I went to Hampton, and I even got to meet Coach Avery, Zeke Avery, who was the head coach of Hampton at the time. We ended up talking, and I was like, oh yeah, by the way, where's my tape? And he was like, dude, I don't even know if I even received your tape, to be honest with you. Look over here, and he's had a whole stack of mail that he hadn't even went through. I even showed it to him, and he looked at it. He was like, man, if I would have received this, I would have definitely had you on the team. So again, it's so different now. It is. And even though I'm talking about 93, it feels like, 53, because technology has changed drastically since that time.
Yeah, it's changed so much. It's really crazy. It's like every year there's new technology, new recruiting, new film, everything. It's just booming. So it's exciting to see. I'm excited to see where these high school kids decide to go and really shake up the landscape. But while you were at Hampton, I know you mentioned you knew you wanted to be in television really from the start. Was that something? Like, why did you know, or what was the reason for that? Was it growing up watching certain programs where you're like, I want to be like this guy, or I just want to be around athletics?
Yeah, I think, I was always different. And I think my mother would probably tell you the same thing. I was kind of a different kid, even though I love sports. I love sports so much that I eat, slept, and breathed it. I was a guy who would read the newspaper. I was a guy who would always look in the box scores. I was a guy who watched all the programs. So I used to watch like the sports anchor for our local affiliate to see what was going on. At that time, ESPN, I used to love Dick Vitale. I used to watch him doing games. And every Friday night, for me, I used to watch Nightline. I thought Ted Koppel was like, I revered Ted Koppel. I thought I just loved his voice. I loved the aura. I would watch 60. I was like 12 years old. I would watch 60 Minutes. I loved Ed Bradley. I thought he was so cool because he had an earring on and he would do his. I was like, man, this guy is too cool. So as a kid, I loved the news, and I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to tell stories, and I want to do sports and talk about games. And hopefully people will be talking about me. And so when I went to Hampton, I was focused. I knew what I wanted to do. And I knew, okay, 4 years, I'm going to be out of here. I'm going to get my journalism degree, and I'm getting me a job in television. I don't care where it is. And so that's basically was my focus. And as soon as I graduated, went right back home and got me a gig there in Columbus.
And was that initially in more news rather than sport specifically, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I tell people all the time, you know, for us, the grind was real. So my first job out of college was I worked at a news radio station. And so I had to anchor the news every hour at the top of the hour. And I worked from midnight to 8 in the morning. So I would do the news at midnight, 12 to 12:05, 1 to 1:05, 2 to 2:05, all the way up until the morning drive. And so I did that, man. I did that for a couple of years until one day a news director, he was the news director of the ABC affiliate in Columbus, Ohio. He used to get up in the morning and he would turn on that news radio station because he wanted to know what was going on the night before.
Right.
As he was getting ready to go in, and he would hear my voice every morning. And it just so happened that his wife worked at our radio station. She was in our sales department. And he just casually mentioned one day to his wife, you know, I really like that guy who does the news, reads the news in the morning. What's that guy like? You know? And she was like, oh yeah, that's Brian. She was like, oh, you would love him. He's so good looking. And she used to always say this, Trish Hevel was her name. She used to always say that. She used to say, you're the best dressed man in radio, because when it was my first job, you know, and I didn't, so I would go in like slacks, a polo, a blazer, because I'm thinking it's my job. I got to go there. You know, everybody else, those guys have been in radio so long. They come in jeans, t-shirt, whatever, you know, you're not seeing them. And, but you know, I felt like you got to dress the part. And so every time I would see Trish, she would be like, I can't believe you're in radio the way you dress. And, you know, and everyone they just assumed that, you know, at the time I was like maybe this 30-year-old guy, or because everyone else was so much older than I was. And yeah, he just called me out of the blue one day and said, hey, would you like to go to dinner? We went to dinner, and he was just like, you know, hey, I really would like to hire you at Channel 6. And I was like, oh, I'm like doing cartwheels inside, but I'm trying to play it cool. Like, you know, I love radio. It's something that I love the passion. I love the immediacy. I don't know if I want to really transition into television because I'm trying to be cool, trying to get more money out of him. And he was like, no, I just think it'd be great for you, you know, for your career. Listen, I understand you're probably established. How old are you? 30, 31? And I was like, no, I'm 23. And he was like, what? You know, he was like, what? And I was like, yeah, I'm 23. And he was like, you know, man, I got to have you. And so, yeah, I basically signed the contract that night. I mean, I tried to be cool, but as soon as he put the contract in front of me, I was just like, yeah, okay, Ted, here you go. Now, obviously, I know better next time. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, yeah, I mean, so when you jumped into that role, and then, you know, you break into the sports scene, you start doing some things for, you know, later down the line for the Jets, Broadway boxing. I know, you know, you're not a Jets fan, but you're close to the action there. And some of those years you're around Rex Ryan. And, you know, I'm a Pats fan. I grew up outside of Boston, so I can't, you know, I'm not a Jets fan by any means. But when I look at those teams, it's hard not to like Rex Ryan and the antics and the Hard Knock series those guys had. I mean, it was like must-watch TV. So I'd imagine those years were pretty fun for you.
Well, there's a reason why they are the highest. HBO will even tell you this today. They are the highest rated Hard Knocks series ever. You know, besides, you know, the Cowboys had some pretty good ratings. Other teams had some pretty good ones, but nothing comes in comparison to the Rex Ryan Jets. Those were the highest rate, whether it was, you know, Rex Ryan, let's go get a fucking snack, or what the other things where they had those toys that those dildo toys they were messing with on the practice field. You know, I mean, it was it was, I tell you what, those teams were so off the chain, and it was great doing those jet shows during those days because you never knew what you were going to get with him. And that was him. That was his personality. It wasn't like an act that he was putting on. That was Rex. That was Rex who came out and we're going to win the Super Bowl and we're going to go and meet the new president. Because I think at the time Barack Obama had just got elected president, and he was like, yeah, we're going to go and meet the new president. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And he was just like that. He liked putting it all on him. Now, from a media standpoint, you're putting a big bullseye on your team, but in his eye, he thought he was putting the pressure all on him. And the teams played pretty well. I mean, they had some really good teams. Obviously you needed Mark Sanchez to play better as a quarterback. But I mean, he had a great defense. They had a tremendous running game with Thomas Jones and Leon Washington and those guys. They just had a lot of good pieces, good players from Damian Woody, Bart Scott. I mean, they just had personalities that mimicked Rex Ryan. It was a lot of fun covering those guys. And then once they started peeling away some of the pieces from those guys, and obviously the talent went down, that's when I think the bravado of Rex kind of fell on empty ears on Jet fans. Because it's like, here you are still pumping up. We're going to do this. But he knew his team wasn't that good. But he was still trying to get them to believe they were competitive and they were good. And when you're getting your head beat in by the Patriots or everyone else, it's like, dude, the act is over. You got to go.
Yeah. Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. I mean, it was like very entertaining and it was real. Like he brought them to an AFC championship, and it was like, oh my God, like this guy, he's rallying like the players around him. This is incredible what he's doing. And then it started to fade, and then it just became more of not much walking and a lot of talking.
Exactly.
Yeah. But there was like some fun years. I mean, I imagine you guys had a blast just being around it and the energy that he brought to the Jets. Obviously the Jets have struggled as of late, but they have some new draft picks coming in, that big left tackle, hopefully that protects Darnold. I don't know why I'm sounding like a Jets fan all of a sudden, but I guess I'm throwing some of my friends a bone here. I got some friends who are Jets fans. So, I hope, I hope they have a good year,
I'd like to say they're trending upward. You know what I mean? Yeah. The good thing for them is Brady's gone, so Brady's gone. I think it's interesting. I tell people all the time, Cam didn't come there to be a backup. Cam came there to play. And if he can come in there and do what he wanted, I mean, New England, that defense was great last year. Obviously they need a few more weapons, but, Cam can elevate that team as well. But for the Jets, I think, if you get Becton in there to protect Sam Darnold, they need, they got Denzel Mims, who's a great young stud out of Baylor, who's going to do some things for them receiver-wise. They need some more talent on the outside. Need them a really, really good running back. I think Le'Veon Bell is good. I don't know if he's still the same Le'Veon Bell. A game changer, I would like to say. But I guess we'll find out with that offensive line, once they can get that together. But I still say they're a couple years away before they really start to contend like they were back in the past.
Yeah. Well, to bring things back to fighting a little bit, I'm very curious about your experience with Taekwondo, because I know you're a black belt. It's a martial art, and I'd be curious about your start in Taekwondo and kind of your journey to becoming a black belt, and honestly learning more about what that, I understand, it takes a ton of work to become a black belt, but really what that looks like year to year, and the levels.
A lot of work. Yeah. A lot of work. It's a lot of work. And for me, I've always, going back to when I was a kid, I mean, I think like a lot of kids who grew up in the 70s, late 70s, things of that nature. I mean, you're Bruce Lee fans. So, I was one of those guys, big Bruce Lee fan as a kid. Wanted to take martial arts when I was a kid, but, my mother told me it was just too expensive. So I never got the opportunity to do it. Once I got a taste of it when I was in college, and I remember taking a couple of college karate classes. So that's when I kind of got a taste of it. But then once I started working, it was, I was just working. I was trying to establish myself, and I think like many other people, maybe just playing basketball, just working out to stay in shape. It wasn't really until later in life, man, that I picked it up again. And I'll be honest with you, it was in my late 30s where I was like, man, you know what? I am not going to be 40 and not pursue one of my passions. And at the time, as a kid, I wanted to be Bruce Lee. I wanted to take on the art and see what it was like. And so that's what I did. It was like a present to myself. I want to say maybe it was my 37th or 38th birthday. I said, okay, I found me a martial arts school, and I went in there and took it and just fell in love, man. I was like, yes, this is it. Because, you find out with martial arts, it's a mindset. It's really, that's where, if you find a really good school, they're obviously going to teach you the art, but I think the art really teaches you to be strong up here. And you can apply it to anything in life, whether it's your professional life, whether it is, if you get sick, like I've had the opportunity of that. It's like, okay, so you know what? What's your mindset? Are you going to be a fighter, or are you going to succumb to this? And that's really what martial arts does. It was a lot of training. I think it took me about, and again, you have to find a really good school. There are a number of schools, they sign you to a contract and they're testing you, whether it's every 3 months, every 6 months, whatever that it is, because, you're under contract. They're trying to make money. And the only way you're going to make money is by testing you a lot, so you feel good about yourself. But are you really learning the art? And I found a school where there was no contract. Hey, you pay if you want to come. You don't want to come, don't come. And my instructor, who's still my instructor today, it was great. I don't think I tested it. It took me maybe a year before I finally got my first test. And I want to say about 6.5 years before I finally became a black belt. And then, if you're following the true rules, I couldn't test again for another 2 years. So then it took me another 2 years before I could test for my second degree. And even now I'm up again, I can test again. It takes you another 2 years before you can test for your third degree. So I'm up for my test now if I want to do it, but it's a lot of work. Obviously learning the patterns, learning the self-defense, and it's a lifestyle too. It's just a way of life. You kind of change your way of thinking and the way you treat people. I think a lot of people too, they laugh. Like if, sometimes people may say something and I may say, yeah, yes, sir, or yes, ma'am. And it's natural, because you have to do it when you're training. Yep. And so, yeah, it is. It's done a lot. It's basically helped change my life.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is Taekwondo and all forms of combat martial arts and boxing, a lot of people forget that boxing is really a martial art, falls under that umbrella. And all of those forms of fighting, they do so much for people. They bring discipline and, like you said, respect. We can get into a little bit. I am curious about, like, with your Taekwondo, if you competed or sparred, things like that.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear some stories about that, but just touching more on, with the gaining a respect for the art of it, I think is lost in a lot of fans' mind. They just kind of see it as, two guys fighting out of rage, and it's really not that at all. It's total skill and the ability to stay calm. And, there's nothing more humbling than, I've sparred with boxing. I love boxing. I love all martial arts, but boxing is really what I've come close to. Yeah. And with sparring, even myself a few times, it's like, it's very humbling. You realize, wow, maybe I can't just take on anyone, It's very, you see the world much differently after your first time actually really getting in there and with someone skilled. So.
Yeah, man, it is, it's great. And it all correlates together, because again, I think if you find the right school, I know I can only speak for my instructor. The first thing he told us is, you are going to be, especially if you're a black belt, he says, I can put you in any discipline and you should be able to handle yourself. So if you go into a jiu-jitsu school, you should be able to handle yourself. if you go inside a boxing ring, you should be able to handle yourself. So yeah, I was kind of like you. I've always, even as a kid, I loved to fight. I mean, that's why and compete. And so that's why, I loved football. I love basketball, and I'm more of an aggressive player. And so that's why I love martial arts too. But the one thing I realized too is I've also learned how to control my emotions. So I've learned how, if I get tagged or if I get hit, I show that, whether that punch hurt or whatever, I don't show anything. You got to have a poker face, because you got to learn how to control your emotions. Footwork is very important in martial arts, just like it's very important in boxing. And we always say that whenever you're competing, it is always about hit that person, not get hit. So I'm always trying to get in, move, and get out. And so, yeah, one of the things for us in our school was, it was mandatory that, obviously we spar, but it was mandatory that we compete. And so our instructor made us compete at the top. So every year we had to compete at the New York martial arts, which is the largest here, basically on this side of the country. You got people from all kind of countries that come in to compete here in New York City for our martial arts tournament, and we had to compete in it, man. I won it twice for my age group. So that was probably one of the highlights of my martial arts career, was winning that thing and winning the gold medal twice at that place. And so yeah, it was quite an accomplishment. And but again, it all goes back to the discipline. It all goes back to knowing how to handle yourself, and knowing how to, when I'm in the ring with somebody, hey, look, I know if this guy is a big slugger, okay, I'm just going to move and tag this guy and win on points like that. So just knowing how to fight.
Yeah, and I think it's so cool for a guy like yourself to have a background in a martial art while you're covering a sport like boxing, or covering combat sport. I think it's so important. And I'm curious to hear more from you about when you're watching. I mean, I know you, during Broadway boxing, were you practicing Taekwondo at the time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So even at the beginning, I'm sure, the way you watch fights is different than the average commentator or the average person. You're observing the footwork, right, the skill, and you understand, like, this guy just slipped a punch, how difficult that is, and what's going on in there. I think that's so important, and it's a thing that's not common. I find a lot of commentators or people involved in the sport. I'm not disrespecting anyone, but I'm just saying it's so valued to have some sort of background.
The one thing I've had to do is, especially when I've been working and calling fights, is not, even though I may see something and be like, oh, he's setting this guy up, oh, he's going to set him up with a catch and shoot, I can tell he tried it in the second round, but I got to set up my analyst. So really, when I'm calling the fights, it's just calling the action and setting him up. And generally, the great thing is I get to work with some very talented people, right, whether it's Al Bernstein, Steve Farhood. I mean, they've been doing the sport so they can see, and they know. I don't have any problems with them. But sometimes you work with other people and they're just calling, oh, that was a good right hand. I'm like, dude, we all saw that. I mean, give me something more. Tell me, why did he score on that right hand? So sometimes in the breaks or whatever, I'm like, yo, you got to give me a little bit more. Give me a little bit more. Tell me why that punch scored, and tell me why he was holding. He was holding his hand down here, and so before that kid throws that punch, make sure you make the point. Yeah, he's keeping that right hand low. He's gonna be susceptible to a left hook. Sometimes you got to tell guys that, because it's their first time doing TV, and and I'm like, we can all see he scored with that right hand. Right. Tell me why it happened. And so I had to, a lot of times when I'm seeing stuff, I mean, I always feel like it's not my job. If I'm getting paid to do play-by-play, that's what they're paying me for. It's this guy's job to be the analyst and tell people why it's happening. So I got to try to serve him up to do that. So that's kind of
helps with your background to tee it up.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
You can guide them into, so I think, it definitely plays.
Yes.
But yeah, so another matchup, the McGregor Mayweather matchup, obviously that's, incredible for you. I remember watching on TV, seeing you, you know, at the podium, being involved. I'm sure there's endless stories about it and the energy, everything, the experience behind it. But I'm more curious with the fight itself. You know, you watching with your Taekwondo background, and maybe your appreciation. I'll give all the praise to Mayweather, but I'm just saying the appreciation for what McGregor did, stepping into Mayweather's world like he did. It takes huge balls to do that, and I think a lot of people didn't really. They kind of didn't give him credit for that, which.
No, and listen, I mean, I think first of all, you know, I said that, I said it then, I think the night of, and I'll say it again, for him to go in there and to go 10 rounds, you know, that's phenomenal. And you know, he was competitive at certain points. You know, I always said when people ask me about the fight, I think the only problem is when you're a guy who's accustomed to going 25 minutes, and that's the length of your fight, and you've always been trained for that, it's gonna be a problem when you come into boxing, because you know, boxing, a full boxing match 36 minutes. So you've been trained for 25. Now you're going into a world of 36. How do you, and you can say this can't, we're going to just extend and we're going to, I mean, yeah, but it's just not that easy when your body's used to that, used to those 25 minutes at the max. And so that's why I always felt like it's not going to end well for him, because his body is not accustomed to that. And especially having one training camp, I could see if you had a couple, okay, now you can get used to that, but not just one. It's not going to happen. So that was the only reason why I knew that Floyd would dominate it. Now, to be honest with you, I'll tell you a tip. Floyd didn't really train hardly at all for that fight. I mean, he trained, but it was like more just regular training to stay in shape. It wasn't like he was training for a real fight, you know. And so, and you know, he knew I will give him this. He knew people wanted to see a fight. So that's why I think for the most part, you saw Floyd for the most part like this most of the time, and then just coming forward, throwing, because he was like, okay, I know this dude going to tire out at some point. It may not be this round. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, I can see it. He's gassing, you know. So.
Yeah, I think it was a little both, you know, like I think McGregor probably surprised Mayweather a little bit with his ability, but at the same time, like you said, Mayweather, I don't think he threw a punch in the first 2 or 3 rounds.
Yeah,
so, I mean,
he really thought he was going to gas himself. He thought Conor would gas himself out really early. Like, okay, after the second round, he's going to be so gassed because he's so excited and hyped and thinking, I'm going to get him. But, you know, hey, give Conor credit, man. Bro, he you know, went through it and he was competitive, a good 5-6 rounds. And then, like you said, then all of a sudden, you know, the tank started getting a little low then. Yeah. And then that was when Floyd says, okay, let me start turning it up on him now. Let me start turning it up on him.
Yeah,
and I'm happy they stopped it, because I didn't want to see him on the ground. Even though, look, I know the macho thing is like, oh, let me fight to the. No one wants to see him get knocked out and knocked through the ring or knocked on. You know, stop it. He was in trouble. It was a good stoppage. You got 10 rounds. I think a lot of people walked out of there saying, okay, hey, look, it was better than Mayweather Pacquiao. So, you know, you got your money's worth.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fight like definitely lived up to some of that. And obviously all the pre-fight antics and everything. I mean, that was just wild. I mean, at times I was like almost a little cringy. I was like, this is getting a little too like ridiculous.
Right.
But some of the shows I thought were like, especially the one in Toronto, I believe. I was this is like incredible. The crowd that was going nuts, and the energy that, you know, you must have experienced just being there. I mean, that's like once in a lifetime fight atmosphere.
That was an outside venue when we were in Toronto. It was an outside venue that they used for concerts, from my understanding. Like Drake would do the OVO concert type thing out there. And they had some seating, and then there was like a grassy hill way at the back. And so they said I think they said on a good night that place could probably hold about 10,000 people. And there was easily over 12. And there was a whole bunch of people outside the gates just wanting to get in. And when I walked out on that, I was like, holy shit, look at all of these people. This is a press conference. And I'm looking around like, look at all of these folks out here. And obviously we had Drake who came and they were like, yo, Brian, Drake is here. So you got to introduce, make sure you bring out Drake. And I was like, oh shit, Drake is here? I'm like, it was unbelievable. The number of people, whatever stop we were at, who were either in the wings or you had to bring out because they just wanted to be there. It was something, man. It really was.
Yeah, I mean, it was an incredible show. Like once in a life, it's really hard to, like, I pinch myself. Like sometimes I'm thinking about like, did that even happen? Like that fight. It's almost bizarre that it even took place, but I'm glad it did. It was a good show, and I think it was really great for both sports. Really, I mean, it brought more attention to MMA, and it kept boxing, front page and center, which is good. And Floyd doesn't seem like he's done. I know recently he's posted something the other day that he has a couple more fights, maybe with Ryzen and over in Japan. Who knows what's going on with that? I doubt it's anything or any really notable opponent. We'll see what happens over there. Floyd's always trying to make some money, so I can't knock him.
Yeah, the amazing thing with him is, and especially talking with Mayweather Promotions and Leonard Ellerby, is he would always tell you you'll be surprised at the number of offers he gets from Abu Dhabi or Saudi Arabia. Hey, to just come over here and let's do an exhibition with 3 rounds or 5 rounds with such and such, or blah blah blah, and we'll pay you $50 million. He says, if I showed you the number of offers we've gotten like that, it'd blow your mind. And you just shake your head like, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. You always say, well, Floyd, are you a promoter or what? But hey, look, if these guys are still trying to, I mean, who wouldn't? Who wouldn't take that money?
And on that promoting kind of side, I know Dana White has been talking a little bit about getting into boxing. That's like, there's a whole lot to unpack there. So, but it's like, there's a whole like world of info to talk about there. But if he did, there's rumors he could bring someone, even like I've seen Mike Tyson being rumored about somehow, he's involved in the promotion. Floyd, there's been a lot of rumors with Dana White and Floyd starting something. Curious to hear if you've heard certain rumors like that, or what your thoughts would be on Dana White trying to basically create like a UFC belt for boxing and trying to get rid of like the alphabet soup that's going on.
Yeah, I think it will be hard. I think Dana could lean on, hey, look at the way I market the UFC. Look how popular we have become. And I feel like I can do the same thing in boxing. But then, you get into boxing and then there's a number of guys and there's a number of promoters be like, yo, that's UFC. And then they would look at these fighters and then they will say, okay, so you want this guy to come over here and start promoting fights? Or have you talked to the fighters over at UFC who keep complaining about the pay? And that these guys have to keep fighting all the time just to make money. And then they have these big fights and got paid $200,000, maybe $150,000. So why don't you go talk to those guys? Why don't you talk to the big guys, whether it's John Jones and Masvidal, who keep complaining about their contracts and they're mad that they got to really keep fighting if they want to make big money and that they make pennies compared to fighters. And so I think that's the argument that boxing has. Whenever Dana White tries to make the argument like, hey, I'm trying to come into boxing, they'd be like, okay, you go with this guy, you ain't gonna be making no money. You complaining now? You really wouldn't be making any money if he comes over here. So, yeah, I just think that, look, you stay in your lane. You're successful at what you're doing. I think he should be commended what he's done with the UFC and continue to do what he's doing with UFC. And, dibble and dabble. If one of the fighters wants to fight a boxer and try to put together a Mayweather McGregor thing again, okay, fine. I think those two worlds can collide. If you got a guy who's a great striker, let's see it. But it's got to be the right UFC guy, and it's got to be against the right boxer as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because only Conor and Floyd have that persona that can sell it.
Right.
Even though you have a guy like, let's say, Nate Diaz, fantastic striker. And we know he spars a lot. He's a boxer too. He spars a lot. But
Andre Ward, yeah.
Do the regular boxing fan know Nate Diaz? They may have heard of him. They don't know him like that. And then would they be willing to pay money to see him, let's say fight? And I'm just throwing out a name. I don't know, an Adrian Broner or something like that. Guys like, man, I ain't watching that. I'm not paying for that.
No. Yeah.
You know what I mean? You had the right mix. You had the biggest star in UFC, the biggest star in boxing, and they both had the biggest personalities. That's why their worlds could collide.
Right. Yeah. And I'm honestly kind of done with the crossover. There's not really too many guys that I'd want to see crossover at this point. And it's like, I kind of know what the outcome's going to be 99% of the time. If a boxer goes into an MMA fight, he's most likely going to lose, and vice versa. Like it's two different things. And I'm good keeping it that way, honestly.
Absolutely.
Let's just keep it rolling, So, with boxing today, there's a lot of fights being made. There's some fights tonight on ESPN. DAZN has been working on some things in Eddie Hearn's back garden. I love saying back garden. I think that's so funny. Like it's just backyard. They call it the back garden fights. But I mean, I think it's great that Eddie's doing that. With PBC, I'm not sure what they have in the mix. I'm sure they're trying to come up with solutions or ways to get guys back in there, because there's so many PBC fighters that the fans want to see. There's huge sharks in the welterweight division signed under PBC that we want to see ASAP. And it's like, fans are itching to see these fights. Eroll Spence, Manny Pacquiao, Danny Garcia, Porter. Who else am I missing in the welterweight division? And Derevchenko with Canelo. That's a rumored matchup, which would be a great fight. Derevchenko really beat up Triple G pretty handedly. So, I mean, I think he totally deserves a shot at Canelo.
Well, I think what, I can only speak for Showtime. I think, Showtime here very soon is going to announce a fantastic lineup of fights. I know that I think some people have already found out that, yes, we are coming back in August, the very beginning of August. And I know Stephen Fulton and Angelo Leo, two unbeaten 122-pounders, will go at it. And that's going to be a hell of a fight. I mean, one of the guys is like 20-0. The other one's 19-0. Fulton, who we've seen on Showtime a couple of times, has beaten 7 unbeaten fighters. As he says, that's what he does. He knocks off unbeaten fighters. And so Angelo Leo, who's under that Mayweather stable, is a really good fighter. So that's going to be one heck of a fight, where I know we're going to do that. I know you'll probably see Gervonta Davis, Leo Santa Cruz fight towards the end of the year. I know they want to do that. They want to probably do it at the end of the year to kind of see where the virus is at that time, to see if maybe it's one where you can start having fans back. But otherwise, I'm sure that will be a pay-per-view fight.
I was going to ask about Davis, because I know, there's so much talk nowadays with him, and that whole division's like everyone's calling out everyone. Devin Hayes, Lomachenko, Garcia, all these guys are talking trash to one another. And it's like, I'm kind of waiting on Tank at this point. Like, I kind of want to see him. He kind of seems like he keeps pushing it back, and that might be Mayweather in his ear. He's like, give him time. But it's like, I don't know, man. The time's now. Like, I want to see you now. And I really don't want to see you fight, a B-level guy. And
And listen, I think what you have to realize is it goes both ways. I think a lot of people on the surface will say, "Oh, well, that's just Mayweather. He does that with all the fight. He picks them when he wants them, and he's telling Tank the same thing." But you also have to look at it on the other side, because whether it's Lomachenko, whether it's Ryan Garcia under Oscar, those are like their gems. And the last thing they want is to have him, whether it's Lomachenko or whatever it's Garcia, who is really young,
right,
have them knocked off, and then have them knocked off against another guy's fighter, not your own fighter, but another guy's fighter. That's the worst, because it's like, man, I done lost all kind of money. I could have had a fight where it's just two of my guys and I take home all the money. Now I got to split it with this guy, and he beat my guy. And now what am I left with? I had this great champion. Now that I had to split the money, and he got all my belts too. You know what I mean? And so people forget about that side of it. And so it's both people. It's both. It's not just one side. It's both of them, because you got to look at the economics of it. And I think that's why you see Lomachenko and Teofimo Lopez, two Bob Arum fighters, and he knows he's got that big deal with ESPN, and ESPN ain't trying to split no money. No, if you're gonna make a fight with Lomachenko, it needs to be on here. I'm not trying to do a deal. And ESPN has told us we ain't trying to split no money with Showtime. So no, if you're gonna have your two studs fight, we want them fighting on ESPN.
And that's a hell of a fight too.
Great fight. Great fight. So that kind of answers your question too, why you haven't seen, Tank fighting this guy, Tank fighting, because, listen, the ESPN realizes, like you talked about, some of the fights you've seen today, they've come to Bob and said, hey, look, man, we got to step up. We need some big time stuff, but we need it here. We need it on here if we're going to continue to have boxing. And so that's why you're going to see those guys. But look, two Arum guys, and it all stays in the ESPN.
Yeah. I mean, that's honestly kind of the unfortunate aspect of boxing is like, that's the exact like complexity that is bad for the sport, where you look at the UFC and they have that, the 135 division in the UFC, and it's like the best of the best are going to fight each other. And if they lose, it's fine, because they're still going to be in that clear ranking system under one belt. So it's like, if a guy takes an L, like, it's all right. He's going to, he's one fight away from being right back in again. So
exactly. And I don't know why in boxing, like you just pointed out, that's a great point, because in the UFC it's the case. I don't know why we in boxing, for some reason, a guy takes an L, you're like, oh my God, this guy's done. Oh boy,
like Garbrandt in the UFC, he just had a tremendous knockout win a couple weeks ago, and he was on a 3-fight losing streak, all knockouts. Got knocked out 3 straight times, and he just had a great quality win. And now he's like the talk of the division, and he's right back in the title picture, and no one cares. Everyone's like, it's a new Cody. He's
there
back.
You go. Yeah, there you go.
That would never happen in boxing.
Yeah, I don't know why, but for some reason for some reason there's always been this misnomer in boxing. Oh, you lose, you're done. Oh, you put him at the bottom. What? It's one loss.
Right.
What are you talking about? It's one loss. Come on.
And that's what's unfortunate, because I hope the fans are smart enough to know that if there's really high quality competitive fights being put on and guys are losing, they won't be thrown away.
Right.
That's what I would hope.
Yes.
Like, I understand. I mean, it's not right, but I understand if if Ryan Garcia loses next fight to some guy I never heard of, and people lose interest in him, then like, all right. But like, if him and Davis fight, the loser of that I don't think would be thrown away, because people would look at it like, hey, that was a sick matchup. I'm happy that it happened.
Exactly. Two young studs. One's 21. The other one's barely 24. So, I mean, how can you throw those guys away? They got so much to look forward to in their careers.
That's how we get those trilogies too. It's like, that's what we want. We want those classic trilogy matchups, not maybe they'll fight each other when they're 32. Like,
right. Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, there's a ton of great fighters just on the bench right now. I mean, Eroll Spence is a guy that I'm like super excited and curious to see what he looks like. Obviously had that horrific car accident. So it's just like, is he going to be the same? I don't know. I mean, I want to see him in the ring before he fights Terrence Crawford. That's my management decision if I was Eroll's guy. But maybe he's good. Maybe he's like not affected and he's ready to go right now, which I would love to see that matchup. Everyone wants Crawford Spence. So,
well, I would say to everybody who watches your podcast, this Brooklyn Boxing Podcast, I would say they need to go right now, subscribe to my Last Stand podcast on YouTube. We're on Apple, Spotify, But if you want to watch it, obviously YouTube, go there. And right now, and we interviewed Eroll. I interviewed Eroll for over an hour. It was the only interview he's really done, and his most comprehensive interview. He talked about his return. He talked about, yes, he is fighting this year. He talked about doesn't want a tune-up fight. He talked about, named his 3 guys that he wants to fight. He talked about Danny Garcia. He said Manny Pacquiao, Terrence Crawford. Those are the 3 I want. And I asked him, I said, don't you think you need a tune-up? And he said, nah, I think to quote him correctly, he said, I'm a shark, so sharks, you keep a shark in its natural habitat. You don't put a shark in a pool. You put a shark in the deep water and let him swim in his deep water. And he says, so if you're going to give me a tune-up, you tune me up with either Danny Garcia, Manny Pacquiao, one of those guys. And then he said he doesn't want to leave 147 until he fights Terrence Crawford. And he said he's already told it. Al Heyman the same thing. So
that fight has got to happen. It's got to happen.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's a great interview. It is on my podcast. You can go there. And we interviewed Bud Crawford.
Yeah.
Bud Crawford, we interviewed him, and he said the same thing, that he wanted to fight Manny Pacquiao, that he said they've been talking, trying to negotiate that.
Everyone wants Manny.
Yeah. And he made the point that, Bud Crawford's point was 2 years ago when he wanted Manny, he said everyone ridiculed him when Manny was over at Top Rank. They're like, yo, why you want to fight Manny? Manny old. He goes, then all of a sudden, he goes, this guy goes over to the PBC, knocks off Broner, knocks off Keith Thurman, and all of a sudden everybody's like, oh my God, Manny Pacquiao's back. Manny Pacquiao's the guy. I got to fight Manny Pacquiao. And he said, I'm sitting over here like, wait a minute. 2 years ago, you guys wrote me off because I wanted to fight Manny Pacquiao. Now all of a sudden, everybody wants to fight these guys, and you guys are praising Manny Pacquiao. So that was his argument. Bud Crawford was really, really funny. I was thrilled that he wanted to do the interview because I didn't know. I had never met Bud. I basically had reached out to his people and said, I'd love to have him on the Last Stand podcast. And she called me back and said, Bud told me he's a fan of yours and he would love to sit down with you and do it. I was like, fantastic.
That's
awesome. It was great. And it was great because as I told him, I'm a fan of his. I think he's a fantastic fighter. And he said, no, I watch you guys all the time. He goes, I've always wanted to be interviewed by you, so let's do it. And it was great. It was great to talk to him. He's a great young man.
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to Teddy Atlas the other day, and he was talking about on his podcast as well a little bit about Terrence Crawford and just his skill set. And, how in his last fight, things weren't really going well for him on the outside. And then he said, kind of screw it. And just waded right into the deep water and just got him out of there. And it's like, this dude, he has that just killer mindset, kind of that old school mindset. He's super skilled. He's a switch hitter. And then you got Eroll Spence, like we mentioned, who's a tremendous fighter as well. And it's just like such a clash of great fighters. Obviously, we got Manny. We don't want to overlook Manny. I mean, you can't overlook Manny. Manny shocked the world against Keith Thurman. I mean, that was incredible that he knocked him down the first round the way he did. So he's in the mix. The welterweight division's on fire. I love it. I just want to see these guys get in soon. So hopefully that happens. So we'll check that out.
Absolutely. And I think you'll be surprised when you go to the podcast and you listen to him. You'll be surprised because I asked Eroll, how does he see that fight playing out in the ring? I asked Bud Crawford the same thing, and they both had very different opinions. I mean, obviously they both said they were going to win, but how Eroll said he thought Bud Crawford would come at him and how Bud Crawford says he thinks Errol's going to come at him, totally different. And it's really you get a chuckle how both of them felt like the fight was going to end because they both felt like it was going to end in a knockout because the other one's going to be too reckless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great fight on the horizon. But some of the fighters today are the stars of the game today. Canelo's probably the face of boxing. And then obviously the heavyweight division's on fire, which is like the best news for the sport. Like the best thing that could be happening is the heavyweight division to be on fire. Obviously we got the Wilder Fury rematch on the horizon, rumored for Raider Stadium, the new Raider Stadium, which I think would be a tremendous show. And then Canelo's, they're trying to find him an opponent. Like I mentioned, Derevchenko, I think would be a good option, and maybe he'll stay up at 175. There's some killers at that weight as well. But Canelo really seems like he's carrying the sport with the zone right now. At least seems like he's really the face. But it doesn't seem like the zone has many other guys in their stable other than Canelo. And then, Joshua's back, but he lost some of that shine, with his loss to Ruiz, and Tyson really kind of has the shine now in the heavyweight division. So it's interesting to see the landscape play out. I think each network, it bounces up and down with their fighters, and there's a lot to be played out over the next couple of months, and really who dominates the scene.
I think with Sergey Derevchenko, and you make a great point, especially in that fight with Triple G. I think a lot of people was like, okay, they gave Triple G that win. Don't know about that. But don't sleep on Derevchenko versus Charlo. I think that one is probably going to be more. I don't know. I think Canelo looks at Derevchenko and says, high risk, low reward. And DAZN is really on them about, I need you to be in a fight with a high quality, and not to say Derevchenko is not, but I think from
John level.
Yes, because it's going to be more, you got to pay for DAZN. It's
Right.
It's almost like a pay-per-view type thing with them, especially with them raising their rates now too, because that contract they gave him was so big. They need a return on that investment. And probably one of the best things that has happened in light of this COVID situation is that maybe the economics of boxing will come back, where I thought it just got really out of whack because DAZN, Fox Sports, a number of people got into boxing, and then to get into boxing, they felt like they needed to make a splash. And what did they do? DAZN, give Canelo a $300 million contract. Fox Sports, we're gonna not only put on fights, but we're gonna make it seem like every time Fox was doing a fight, it was a pay-per-view fight. And it was like, oh, why is that? That should be just a regular championship fight. Why are you putting it on pay-per-view? And so now, whether it's Eroll Spence or whether it is Danny Garcia, or I'm just throwing out names, they see themselves now as just pay-per-view fighters. Why? Because, hey, when Fox got on, they were making me pay-per-view type guy. And I just think the economics got out of whack. Now, all of a sudden, with COVID, all of a sudden, everybody had to tighten up the purse strings here. And so maybe the economics will come back. And that means, I think maybe the good thing for fans is you get high-quality matches, but now these networks ain't having to pay that exorbitant price for that fight like they were in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And guys will recognize that. So I think that will probably be the good thing that comes out of that. As for Canelo, man, it will be interesting to see. I just recently did a interview with David Benavidez, who talked a lot about his next opponent, talked a lot about unifying against Caleb Plant because they have some serious beef. But he was like, I got my eyes on Canelo, and I mean, wouldn't that be a hell of a fight? David Benavidez is an exciting fighter, man, and he's just going to come forward.
And he's big. He's big.
Yeah, big boy too, man. He's a big boy to be 168. And he said that. He said, look, if I got to go to 175 and chase him, I'll do it. But, I think he really wants to fight Caleb Plant. He wants a unification fight with Caleb Plant first. And then he said, after that, my eyes are on trying to get Canelo, whether it's at 168 or 175.
Yeah, Benavidez, I mean, he's a big guy at 168. Definitely could give Canelo some problems. Although I do feel like Canelo at this point, he's not going to lose a decision.
Yeah, right.
So
Yes.
it's like he's hard to beat right now.
Yeah.
like if you get him out of there, but I mean, Canelo's very good. He's very good. Like he's so good defensively, and he's evolved through his career. So it's like I just don't see anyone beating him unless they can knock him out. And it's like I don't know who could do that. Charlo maybe.
You hit it.
Bring it to him.
His footwork is phenomenal and doesn't get a lot of credit for that. But his footwork and his movement, some of the best around. Look, and I know he's taking his lumps and reasonably so for, you know, popping positive for a couple of them tests now and that tainted beef stuff. Oh, come on now, you know, you can sell that to somebody else. But, you know, as far as his footwork skill, brother can bring it. So I think in the long run, I think everyone would like to see a Jamal Charlo Canelo fight again. I don't think Oscar wants that to happen anytime soon. And I think I could see more of a Charlo Derevyanchenko fight though.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty high on Charlo. I think he's you know, he's your classic like boxer puncher, but man, he can punch.
Yeah.
And he comes forward too. So
Yes.
I mean, you know, like in Canelo's last matchup against I'm blanking, Crusher,
Mm-hmm.
Kovalev. Kovalev kind of played right into what Canelo wanted. I mean, he was jabbing successfully for a while, but he was never committing to like big shots and putting himself in danger. And Canelo was able to just kind of figure him out in the later rounds and put him away. It almost seemed, it was like kind of an odd fight to watch. Kovalev didn't really seem like he wanted to engage with him at any point, whereas Charlo, that will not be the case.
Exactly. You know, Canelo, he's such a great counter puncher. And once he gets your timing down, it's over. I mean, you ask Kirkland, you can ask all those guys. He gets your timing down, you throw that punch, and you leave that jaw exposed, it's night-night. And so I think that's as you hit it. With Crusher, you know, he's throwing that jab, and then he threw that right hand early, and he threw it. And as he threw it, he just kept that left hand down, and all of a sudden, boom, he's like, okay, yeah, I don't think I want to do that anymore. And so then it was like, okay, now you messed up because it's like, okay, I want to throw the right hand, but every time I throw it, I get hit. So what am I going to do now? I'm throwing the jab. And then all of a sudden, Canelo got his rhythm on his jab. Then he throws that, boom, he would take a punch. He's like, I throw my jab, I get hit. I throw the right hand, I get hit. I mean, I don't know what can I do? And then it was just like, oh, bro, you're going to have to throw the right hand. And when he did it, it was a mistake.
Then it was a wrap.
Yes.
But yeah, Brian, so I mean, I appreciate you coming on big time. It was last talking boxing with you and your journey. You know, before I let you go, I did want you to, you know, you've done so much to raise awareness for prostate cancer, and I know your battle with it. And you beat it. And, you know, you mentioned briefly Taekwondo and the effect it had and maybe some of the benefits mentally it gave you during that battle. So if you wanted to just touch on that and some of the things you're doing to raise awareness, I think it'd be, you know, great for the listeners to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, for me, when I got diagnosed, you know, obviously it was a shocker. And, you know, to have surgery and to know that surgery was really my only option for survival. It was, you know, I can't put into words how it crushed me on the inside. But again, it went to, you know, I had to tell myself, you know, listen, if I call myself a fighter, am I going to fight? And I think whether it is boxing, whether it's sports, so much of it is mental. And I know for the most part, cancer is mental. If you are not mentally strong, it will take you down quicker than the actual disease itself because of all your thoughts and you're gone. So for me, it was a mindset that I knew I was going to fight this thing. I was going to beat it. I know it's been 6 years since surgery, and this was, I used to get checkups every 3 months, still do. But this was the first time in a long time Doc called me and said, man, your number was under 0. So he said that, I hadn't heard that since surgery. So it was just, man, I'm so thankful in light of everything going on with COVID to get kind of news like that for me was great. I would recommend any guy who is a person of color, whether you're 40 years old or older, that they need to get their PSA checked. It's just a simple blood test. Go get your physical. Just tell your doctor, hey, can I get a PSA test so it can test your blood? It could save your life. It did for me because I got mine my first time when I turned 40, and I was just getting my regular physical. And the doctor recommended to me because I was black. He said, you should have your PSA done. And I had no idea what it was for. And he gave it to me and did it. And that's how we found it. And we found it early. Just know that you find it early, you can live a long, healthy life. So I just recommend that everybody do that. And listen, it's not an old man's disease anymore. It is affecting a lot of people. I think when I went and had surgery, there was a guy who was 33 years old in there having surgery. So it's affecting a lot of guys. I know a majority men of color, and that's why it's very important that we get tested, get your physical, but make sure you get your PSA done. And hopefully people who are watching will also tune in and subscribe to the Last Stand podcast too on YouTube as well.
Definitely. Yeah, I appreciate that. And like, Brian said, everyone go check out his podcast as well. Follow him on Instagram. He's got some great guests. Like he mentioned, Eroll Spence, Terrence Crawford, some awesome interviews. So I really appreciate you coming on today. It's awesome. I see you on TV and then I get to talk to you. So it's a pleasure to have you. When we get back, hopefully into some normalcy, I'd love to do it again in the studio, in Brooklyn and talk some more, hopefully when we get big crowds at some of these marquee matchups in the future. So thanks so much for hopping on today.
Sounds like a date. Look forward to it.
Appreciate it.